All right, thank you everyone for having me. So if you don't know, I'm Emma. I'm the CMO of ZK Lend. And today I'll be talking a little about further on in sort of like the business kind of space, so less so about the actual tech and more so about the go-to-market strategies and perspectives from a builder on StarkNet and what are the sort of challenges and opportunities we're thinking about as we look to launch on StarkNet mainnet coming soon. So I guess let me introduce a little bit about myself. I'm the CMO of ZK Lend. Before this, I was a research analyst at Crypto.com, and before that, I started off at a blockchain company in the security tokenization space. So I joined as one of the first employees in the early 2022, and it's been an incredible journey since. In terms of the structure of this talk, I hope to structure it in a certain way. First, I'll just introduce a little bit about myself, which I've done, talk a little bit about ZK Lend, and then finally, ZK Lend on StarkNet, how we see our role in the ecosystem, building on StarkNet, the specific challenges in terms of the competitive landscape as a DApp, and where we hope to be in, say, 12 months' time as we all look towards the launch of Cairo 1. So what is ZK Lend? ZK Lend is a DeFi protocol, and we really aim to have ourselves as the native money market on StarkNet. So what this means is kind of think about compounder Aave, but faster, cheaper, and most of all, secure. So yes, this is what we do. So where are we now in terms of the timeline? This is kind of giving you guys an idea of our development timeline. The co-founding team really came together at the middle to late of 2021, and then the actual team started building in 2022, which is kind of when I joined. We finished the investment, the raising, and we had our first closed beta testnet and open testnet in December 2022. And in closed beta testnet, we obviously have testnet tokens, but no real money. Right now, we're refining. We've got our code audited and verified, and we're looking to really launch mainnet soon in V1. So very exciting. Keep your eyes open for our launch soon. So that's kind of where we are now. So our milestones. From the kind of business and marketing side, it's been just over 12 months, so around 15 months. And what we've been doing since then is that we have 10 full-time team members really focusing on building out an organic community from the ground up, building out a community of people who are actually interested in DeFi, coming from, whether you're coming from alternative L1 chains, wider Ethereum, or L2, covering both native and new DeFi users. So this is our general stuff. We've done things like host real-life events, so shooting Starks in Paris. We've also been on the ground. Our CEO and co-founder, Brian and John, were in Tel Aviv, the StarkNet event there, as well as doing a lot of online AMAs. We started our Zend and Friends and Zend University, which is a learn-to-earn campaign, as well as our Zend and Friends Roundtable, which our second co-founder did, Jane. We're very pleased to have people in the L2 space like Mata Labs, Scroll, and StarkNet themselves kind of attend these events. So we really try to focus and build out a holistic approach covering as many people as possible, bringing brand awareness and identity to the space meaningfully. But aside from just general marketing and Web3, I'm really here today to talk about the StarkNet ecosystem more generally and kind of how we see our relationship as a native dApp building on StarkNet, as well as our role in the ecosystem as well, beyond just a singular dApp. So here, I pulled this from Twitter, and this is a StarkNet ecosystem map. And it's clear that there are a lot of protocols being built out and a lot of social projects and tools. But it is important to remember that we're still very early. And the viability of the long-term viabilities of projects is still something that is to be seen, right? And specifically in the DeFi context as well, it's really important that we have an ecosystem that allows us to do other things, right? So, even though we are just a borrow and lending protocol, it's imperative to have things like AMMs or like trading, because you're not going to go onto StarkNet, take the time to bridge, open a new wallet, get familiar with UX and UI hurdles just to borrow and then do nothing, right? You might borrow, leverage up, trade, buy some NFTs. So it's really important for us to kind of build a good ecosystem. And this kind of leads on to my next point about how we kind of see our strategy within StarkNet, right? And I would say this kind of goes into 3 main buckets. The first is community building, the second is education, and the last is partnerships. So in terms of community building, what has been really interesting since DeFi summer and even following after kind of like the NFT mania and craze is that we have a lot of cross-fertilization between the 2 areas, right? So, DeFi community used to be very kind of siloed, maybe a bit boring, but after the NFT craze, what we have is like cross-fertilization. So you have gamification and socialization, and the appearance of new dApps and tools that enable us to take this kind of community building experience to the next level. And what I'm talking about really here is things like POAPs, Crew3, which has now been called Zeely, but basically that enables users to have a very nice front end for you to assign them quests and things like that, as well as currently mostly EVM compatible stuff, but things like Rabbit Hole or Rabbit Hole or Galaxy, right? So all these are new ways that didn't exist during, say, like 2-3 years ago, which give us new ways to build and gamify the whole social aspect. And some examples of this that we've done is, for example, the ZK-Len quests, and that was done with a Crew3 board, as well as Zender of the Month, AMAs, and international communities. So that's kind of what we've been doing on the StarkNet side, on the community building. And then the second bit is on education. So I can say with confidence that StarkNet has really been putting in a lot of effort to educate and bring on new devs, sharing more about dev meetups, toolings, hackathons, and things like that. But for us, what we find is that, yes, it is super important, and we do have an extremely strong tech team with our CTO kind of writing the Cairo library in Rust, among other things. But it's also important to educate people on a user level. And what this means is stuff like, how to open a wallet, what are ZK rollups, stuff like this. And it becomes kind of like a chicken and egg problem because users want to use something that is, obviously you need protocols and devs to build protocols, but devs only want to build things that users are going to use, and so it becomes a chicken and egg. So we really also want to focus on educating things on the user side and creating something that users want to use and make sense to them. So what we've done here is the Learn to Earn Zen University. We're partnering with a few media partners to create beginner-friendly tutorials when the time comes for mainnet launch, as well as doing a lot of like meetups. So we did one in Hong Kong, as well as like more social ones in Paris as well, and Amsterdam, as well as a lot of boot camps and hackathons. So we have our CTO kind of going there and talking to people about more technical stuff, which is not really my forte. So yeah, that's kind of what we do on the education side of things, which we think is really important for StarkNet, and then also the partnerships. And in the partnership section, what we really want to do is kind of make sure that we're not just preaching to the choir. So when we do partnerships, it's not just internal stuff, say, just the same people who focus specifically on DeFi on StarkNet, which is a tiny, tiny niche anyway. What we want to do is kind of bring our message to people beyond that, right? So for example, we have Ducks Everywhere, a partnership that we did with Chainlink and Pragma and things like that. And that ensures that we're kind of going beyond the echo chamber of the same 20, 30 people. And sometimes on social media and stuff, this kind of the echo chamber effect gets amplified, and we want to avoid that. And the last thing is the second bullet point is kind of educational pushes and media partnerships, and this again goes into the whole idea that we don't want to be preaching to the choir. So that's kind of what we do, and I just wanted to look at one of the partnership case studies that we did recently, and this is all kind of internal with other StarkNet native dApps. So we did a kind of just an experimental partnership with Ducks Everywhere and Brick. So Brick is an NFT building protocol. So I think they like to categorize themselves more as a game, but basically you have many NFTs that are fungible, but they are the lowest denomination, and then you can build those NFTs into bigger things. So for example, a whole duck, which will be made out of say 250 of these bricks, and then these bricks can obviously be broken apart and then sold on the marketplace. So that's basically what Brick is. And then also Ducks Everywhere, which is an artist that actually came very organically into the Brick community. And because of this, we really wanted to kind of show, what is the marketing efforts and, what is the effects of that we can create when StarkNet native dApps work together. So we made 50 ducks, and it was a whole campaign. And they are functional ducks. In the end, it was a great success, and it was a really fun thing to do. So hopefully, this is the kind of like internal dApp level push that we want to see kind of build out StarkNet. And from this, we had a surge in followers and interactions, and hopefully, again, just more of a cross-fertilization. And the thing with NFTs, I think that, DeFi protocols can leverage off of is that people intuitively understand NFTs much easier than DeFi protocols, right? So I have a lot of friends who didn't really get into Web3, opening a MetaMask, using Discord, all this stuff until the NFT craze. And then it just became so natural. And that was one very organic and easy way to onboard people. So yeah. And then now we kind of look at, why are these kind of marketing partnerships and things like that, focusing on a higher level on the user end? Why is it important, right? So I brought up these two charts for two reasons. The first is really that StarkNet is a new chain, right? If you look at where the TVL is, most of it is still concentrated in Ethereum, but obviously there are many other chain options out there. And the question is, say there is TVL, right? And let's just say you want to take market share. How are you going to convince these people or whoever the liquidity providers are that they should move over to StarkNet or bridge their funds over when there's such a huge selection of other chains that also offer great UX and speed. And from a dApp level, I put this chart up on the side, really just pulled it from DeFi Llama, is really we're looking at one, liquidity, and I know that TVL and liquidity is not a perfect indication of the quality of projects or activity on chain, but I think it's still a very good starting point. And then also the number of protocols. And the reason I did this is because if you look at specifically for DeFi and dApps, having deep liquidity is very important. For AMMs, if you do a swap and there's not enough liquidity, well, what is the price impact on that? If the price impact is so high, no one's going to want to use the AMM. It just doesn't work. And then for a borrowing protocol, if the liquidity isn't deep enough, I guess there's other issues in terms of layer 1, layer 2 messaging as well. But for example, if you use a low liquidity market cap coin or whatever, then what is can the oracles be manipulated? Is it safe to use? Especially for a DeFi protocol, you really have to take it seriously because this is people's real money, and you want to make a protocol that is going to be safe and trusted, right? So that's why I think these two are kind of at least TVL is kind of an important metric to have. And the second one is protocols, right? So these are kind of protocols, DeFi protocols on each chain. And the reason I say this kind of is circular, it goes back to my first point, right? When you bridge money onto StarkNet, you deposit and you borrow. What are you borrowing for, right? Is it easy to swap out of it? Are you playing games? Is the price good? And all of this means that it's a DeFi ecosystem, so you need other financial services. Otherwise, you borrow, and what do you borrow for? So that's kind of what we focused on. So these are the kind of things that we think about as a dApp, looking to launch onto mainnet. How do we solve these problems, get liquidity, and incentivize devs to build meaningful protocols for a meaningful ecosystem? So it's not all doom and gloom. I think we are at a very good time right now. And I say this because there is a lot of one, I guess you could say, is a competitive landscape, but two, there is a lot of learnings and a lot of experimentation in the space as a lot of L2 rollups are looking to kind of go to market at the moment, right? So if you look at on the top left, I have this Masari report. And basically, it looks at the wallet retention over time between Arbitrum and Optimism. And what it says is actually quite interesting. It's saying that incentives do matter for liquidity, but once incentives dry out, what really determines wallet retention is actually on the dApp level. So there is some things that individual dApps can do to control and incentivize returning wallet activity. And the second one, the Arbitrum Adventure, I picked that one because it does, for a builder, it does mean that, if it's not on the foundation level, the kind of incentives that we're looking at, there are lots of things that on the dApp level, so for example, zkLend and ZKX protocol or zkLend and Bravos wallet can do to incentivize users, right? So Arbitrum Adventure was actually engineered by Trader Joe on Arbitrum with 13 other protocols. And basically, again, it's just like a gamified experience, and that kind of helped boost the activity metrics during that time, while, of course, bringing more news, more media, and more attention and awareness to the protocol. And also, it's not just doom and gloom, because I think we can safely say that, as there is growing transparency, and as these kind of like go-to-market experiments are going now, there's a whole wealth of tools and data that probably didn't exist before, right? So things like Dune Analytics, DeFi Llama, anyone can kind of use Dune Analytics, and this one is Optimism Foundation's Dune Analytic Board, right? So if you want to see, what the post and pre-quests statistics are, you can just go onto that and have a look. And then you can kind of isolate things and research things to understand what makes sense to you. And then the TVL charts here, I think I chose that on the bottom right. That's actually, I believe that is Trader Joe's TVL that did. So if you look at that, you can kind of see, okay, why is there a sudden peak in TVL? Can we isolate for that factor? And what's the reason for that, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff to be learned. And then on the right, I kind of attached my thread that I did recently thinking about how we can incentivize liquidity and what role liquidity actually plays in building a dApp that actually makes sense. So that's kind of what we've been thinking about on the business side of stuff. And I wanted to kind of end the presentation thinking about what's next. Obviously, StarkNet Alpha, the transition to Cairo is beginning. So hopefully, we launch as a DeFi protocol, not as the only protocol going to mainnet, but alongside other DeFi protocols. And again, there's a lot of activities that we can do to make sure that this launch is great and it goes really well. In terms of the actual transition to Cairo, we will have to get our code audited again when Cairo 1 comes out, but that's something that we will kind of look at further down the line. And the second thing that I really want to highlight is kind of like the governance issues, not issues, but questions that arise with kind of like the go-to-market strategy for a whole ecosystem for dApps, So and there's also lots of things that we can learn and discuss. So it's not necessarily just, look at airdrop, look at, how do we build liquidity and stuff, but, how can we take lessons that can be gleaned from the past? So for example, optimisms like bicameral governance structure, or should it be retroactive or prospective, and things like that. And I think this is co-founder Jane's post on the community forum. So these are all kind of like questions that we're thinking about more on the business side rather than the tech side. But yeah, I think that kind of ends it. And thank you so much for listening to my talk. If you want to follow zkLend, just scan the QR code. And then my Twitter is just the one on the right over there. So thank you. And please ask any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from audience?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering in terms of some of the success metric that you're tracking, which these are the main focus for zkland and the reason behind it? Because so for TVL, it's not really sticky metrics, so it's not really sustainable saying just to track TVL. Then what other metric that you guys are tracking and why?
Yeah, so I actually made a list the other day, and I actually have it here. So if you look at the Masari report, actually, she does a lot of really cool metrics. So things that we look at is not just TVL, but maybe the number of depositors, the number of wallets returning in 30 days, the average transaction value per address, and the average fees per address. So I think, and also this kind of goes into a wider thing about, how metrics and things like that are actually evolving beyond TVL as kind of like the whole industry matures in terms of their understanding.
Yeah, okay, cool, thank you.
Hi, I do also have a question. So, I'm not sure, whether it's public or not, but I think Aave is also kind of having their internal team to basically port over to StarkNet or to also co-launch there. So, as for, I guess, a DeFi native blue chip that's on Ethereum or EVM based, and you guys are kind of native launching on StarkNet, how do you see the positioning? And also, I guess a follow-up question would be, building on StarkNet, like what kind of novel products or features or elements does it bring in comparison to like just launch on Ethereum?
Perfect. So I'll take the first question, and that is how we think about Aave coming onto StarkNet. So first, I think it's definitely a good thing because they will bring a lot of media and attention to that. But at the same time, I think it provides us also a point of differentiation, right? So I don't want to reveal everything now, but we will have product features that really kind of push on the fact that we are native. So whether that's, for example, isolated pools with specific StarkNet native assets, things like that. And then, sorry, could you repeat your second question?
Yeah, I think the gist is basically, so what kind of new undiscovered or uncharted products, features, services does like StarkNet bring in comparison to just launching as a lending protocol or money market on Phantom or Ethereum or the existing chains? Like what kind of, what does, basically I think what does the underlying technology enable that other existing L1s, monolithic chains can't do, besides speed and
Sure. So I can't really speak for, we are actually just looking at it ourselves from like a DeFi perspective, right? So the money market itself is not that of an innovative product, like it's already tried and tested. But I think what StarkNet does promise, will promise, is a very strong and very unique gaming ecosystem, which I think is obviously uncharted, but there is a lot of potential there in terms of like DeFi integration or NFT integration. Yeah, but happy to go into that later if you want. Yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.